Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to your Daily Penguin. I don't know if the audio was picking up, but Frida is snorting just a little. She does these glottal, back in the nose snorts when she's a little sleepy. I don't think she was troubling to hide it much. But anyway, we are going through my Penguin Classic wall, book by book, and as long as it takes for the whole rest of the year. And today, uh, we have largely dispensed with a common theme, at least for the time being. And today is another example of that. Today we are talking about a novel in sequence, a sequence of novels that is one of the underrated literary classics of the English language. Uh, and we've seen it on this channel before. This is Parade's End by Ford Madox Ford. This is a terrific cover. Who did this cover? The Route Nationale by Harold Sandy Williamson. I really like it because your eye first sees the uniformity of the lines, the trees on the soldiers, very impersonal, very much, marching impersonally to war. But then as your eye zeroes in, you see panicked, afraid young men. And that very much is a good pick for these novels. The four novels here, I always blank out the titles because they are, with one exception, terrible. But let's see. Parade's End is a quartet of novels. Sorry, this isn't behaving at all. Hang on just a second here. Yes, Some Do Not, ... is the title of the first book. No More Parades is the second book. A Man Could Stand Up is the third book. And The Last Post is the final book in this tetralogy of novels. About a young man. It's mainly a character study of one man, Christopher Tietjens, who's from the moneyed middle class of English society before World War One, and the whole sequence here is about, in a very loose sense of that word, World War One. But it's really a study of Tietjens' growth as a character. We follow him minutely over the course of what is this? What is this? This finished volume is 800 pages long. We follow him intimately in a bloodless marriage, in a spirited affair, in his relations with his subordinates and superiors, and his somewhat distant orbital relationship with the war. I am at a loss to understand why this book is not better known among the general public, why this isn't quick to people's tongues when they want to list great classics of the 20th century. This is hardly ever mentioned in such lists, any more than, for instance, USA by Don Dos Passos is mentioned. I don't know if is that because the books are because this is a sequence of novels instead of just one huge book. If it were one huge book, would it be maybe ranked a little higher? I don't really know. Ford Madox Ford came out with these all through the middle 20s. One a year, one every 2 years, something like that. And then the final book, which is by far the strangest book of the four, not only narratively but also just plot-wise. It's a strange meditation, almost a meta-meditation, on the three books that came before it. And Ford Madox Ford always said, when he was asked, that he did it really just to tell everybody how all the characters' stories turn out. But it does a lot more than that. It may be my favorite book in the quartet, although the most famous one is the first one. The most famous book of these four is the first one. Maybe a scandalous part of me wants to say maybe that's because that's as far as most people get. I don't know why that would be. I've known a few people in my life who've read this thing, and they don't uniformly love it. I've had quite a few of those people have said that it is boring. I just don't see that. I just don't. It's not as linguistically flashy as a very similar work thematically, which would be Evelyn Waugh's set of books on war. It's not as flashy as that, but almost no writer can manage that the way Waugh can. So I'm not sure that's anything to hold against this author. And what he does really, really well. Maybe it's just that I'm a fan of him just in general. I've never read anything by Ford Madox Ford that I didn't like. Even the editor, or rather the person who writes the introduction to this volume, is called Robbie McCauley, and I think it's Robbie McCauley, if I remember correctly, who refers to Ford Madox Ford's big book on literature as crotchety. I would agree with that. That's, if anything, an understatement. And I even like that. I don't have a copy of it. I don't have a copy of anything by this author except his Tudor fiction and this. And this, oddly enough, I have 2 copies. So I have this one as well. This is a vintage classics edition that has nothing at all. You've got a World War I doughboy, and then you've just got the books. I don't even think this has an afterword. No, this is just Parade's End, and that's all. This is Parade's End plus an introduction. And the introduction is fairly spirited. You don't need it at all. There's nothing to explain in this book. It's that, hence why the introductory essay for this volume is more than a little personal, because it's more a reflection on the book than it is an explanation of the book. You don't need that. This was issued with that clearly in mind, that you don't need any kind of editorial help to fall into this book. No, my question isn't, do you need editorial help? My question is why people don't read this. I don't have an answer to that. Your Penguin Classic today is very much a recommend. This is a fantastic reading experience. Ford Madox Ford, when it was all over, and he was free to look back on it and windify, he was extremely pompous, said that it was a book that he hoped in the whole thing. Parade's End was actually his name for it. This is not cobbled together like, Christopher Tolkien doing something with his father's books. This is, he was fond of saying when this was all over that what he meant for this sequence of books to do was to make war seem unappealing, to sort of discourage future generations from romanticizing it or yearning for it, even on a subconscious level. And I have to say, in a book as big and capacious and absolutely eloquent as this, that's pretty much the only thing it doesn't do. It definitely makes a whole bunch of other things seem unappealing, most especially marriage. Oh my. There's a graduate paper to be written. Probably many of them have been written on Ford Madox Ford and women. You could actually say the same thing about Evelyn Waugh. But there's that. There's regular employment. There's societal change. Kids these days. All of that is made to seem extremely unappealing. But war? I don't know. I've never got that impression myself. I've read books that did. We'll encounter a couple of them in this March of the Penguins that revealed war in a lot of its great ugliness and left you feeling thinned, frightened, distasteful, unappealing. This book doesn't really do that, but maybe that's just me. I would ask, what about you? What did you think? Did it make war seem unappealing to you? But I'd be willing to bet most people listening to this have never read this. And that's amazing to me. I don't understand it. It's brilliant, and it's incredibly, it's a horrible word, but it's incredibly relevant. Since world wars didn't go away, Ford Madox Ford everybody hoped in the 1920s that world war had gone away, but it did not. And privileged young men who would otherwise have had their whole lives ahead of them with the world at their feet have not stopped being ground up like meat in the gears of war. So it'd be one thing if this were a soaring multi-book ode to life in now vanished Brooklyn tenements under the shadow of the elevated line. Maybe then it would be understandable if it's speaking to a world that's completely vanished. Although even then I would wonder, because Dos Passos speaks to a world that has completely vanished. For Pete's sakes, Moby Dick speaks to a world that's completely vanished. But as it is, I don't get it. It was adapted by the BBC, a very, very good but very simple adaptation, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. I think was one of pretty sure it had Rupert Everett in it, but Benedict Cumberbatch, I think, plays Teachins in that series, which I don't think I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen any of it. But my urging would be, if you like huge atmospheric, you know, novels from or ambitious novels from, let's say, the late 20s to the late 40s, thereabouts. If you like that sort of thing, if you are a fan of Olivia Manning, for instance, which again I don't think I will find many, but nevertheless, this is an author that you should read. Not just these books, but everything else. But this is a fine place to start, and I wanted to show you the two editions. Although going and finding this thing for your Daily Penguin today stressed that I don't need two versions of this book. I don't need anything more than the Penguin Classic. So this thing is on shaky ground. So that's your Penguin Classic for today. It's Parade's End, which is, you know, as far away from the last few books that we've done as you could get. So who knows what we'll encounter tomorrow. We will find out. We'll find out together. I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.